come in as they do. So welcome back, everybody. Thank you for joining us again. I realize this is a long journey, and um, we designed it that way on purpose because it is a long journey. In fact, it's probably never ending when you think about wellness and your own cycles and patterns. And I have learned so much about myself during COVID, and my excuses and all the things that I do for myself, and the reasons I don't, and all that. So it really is a long journey, and we don't want it to be a program that begins and ends for you or for your workplace. We really want it to become part of the fabric, or part of, as we learned with Becky in the very beginning, part of the organizational culture. So that even if you as workplace wellness coordinators move on or choose a different role in the system, that it continues. And so that's one of the reasons why we designed this to be such a long-term program, because we wanted to get you started and rolling, and have it feel like there's a continuation, not just a one-time thing. So one thing I do want to ask at this point, we're a little bit further than halfway, but I want to make sure that as we go through this program, before we get to the end, any feedback that you want to give me as far as what you need that might be different, or something that you were expecting to get that you're not getting, or methodology that we could shift, any of that, any feedback for us that would make this more useful, helpful, or accessible to you, we want to hear it. So you can send me an email and just say, hey, I wish we would do this, or I hope we get to some information about XYZ, or I want to try this. Do you have anything on it? And we'll be happy to source that out for you. And if you want some of your feedback to remain anonymous, you're welcome to send it to another member of the team. You have all our email addresses, and you don't, if it's a little more specific, and we don't have to let each other know where it came from. So without further ado, other than welcoming you, I think that my job ends there, and I will turn it back over to Susan for
Great.
some more Train the Trainer.
Great. Well, super excited about today. This is our favorite part because we get to make lots more tree analogies and explore this forest metaphor with the concept of team care. So we're going to get to a lot more discussion today, because this is really about not just your team and how you can sort of build that culture of well-being at your office, but also about this team. So how are we communicating here in these trainings so that we can learn from each other, learn from each other's successes and failures and challenges, but also from each other's personal experience. Like Amy just shared, some of her challenges during the pandemic and things that she's learned. So we'll keep thinking on that, like individual level, small team here in this room level, and then the bigger team back at your workplace. And then, of course, your constituents and society, right? These concentric circles. So this is our team care forest, little drawing. And the thing that I want to start with today is kind of not a meditation, but just like a visualization. And so if you would, we don't need to, do anything special in terms of sitting or standing. You're welcome to stand. In fact, I think I'll stand. And what I'd like for you to do during this opening kind of relaxation is to actually envision a tree. So bring to mind a tree. It can be a tree that you know, like a real tree from your life. Maybe it's outside your window. Maybe it's a childhood favorite tree. Maybe it's a tree in a special place that you love. So just take a moment to think about a tree. Maybe it's a special kind or cultivar of tree that you can imagine how it looks in your head. So take a deep breath. And as you think about this tree, zoom in a little bit in your mind, zoom into the bark of the tree, if you know maybe what the bark looks like or feels like. And maybe see if there's any birds or burrowing owls, insects, even fungus on that tree. What's on it? What's depending on that tree? And then whether you're sitting or standing, feel the roots of that tree sort of in your body. If you're standing, you can feel the connection of your feet to the ground. If you're sitting, you can kind of wiggle your butt a little bit and imagine that there are roots grounding you from your feet or from your seat into the earth that's supporting you and helping hold you up. The tree that you're imagining, what do its roots look like underground? Keep breathing. In fact, take a deep breath, because as you take a deep breath, you're breathing in oxygen and nitrogen in a whole mix, giving that oxygen to your blood, converting it to carbon dioxide and breathing out carbon dioxide. Well, a tree is symbiotic to us. The trees take in carbon dioxide and through photosynthesis create sugars for their own growth and then emit oxygen that we can then breathe. So take another deep breath. And let's go up to the branches of the tree. So it might be an evergreen, it might be a deciduous tree, but whatever those branches look like, they're probably going to sway in the wind a little bit. And pretend like your arms are branches and you can just bring them out to the side if you want, or you can bring your arms up overhead and just giving yourself a little bit of a stretch while you bring your arms out to the side or up overhead. You can imagine that you're a tree too, rooted in your seat or your feet, but also swaying in the wind, sometimes still, sometimes supporting others, sometimes alone, sometimes wet, sometimes hot, sometimes frozen. Trees last any number of days, months, or years, just like humans. And sometimes a tree's life is cut short, just like humans. And sometimes they grow to a long, wonderful presence on the planet. Take a few more breaths in silence. And if anyone would like to share their tree or maybe a story of a tree that they thought of during this opening exercise, we'd love to hear it. Or if you just want to share how that felt for you.
For me, it was like it kind of took me a minute to get into it, but then once I did, and you started going through, sometimes you're wet, sometimes you're alone, like all that. It you would have thought that would make me more tense, but it kind of made me more grounded. Like it did make me feel more in touch with the tree.
Thank you.
I also wanted to remind people that when we do exercises like that, that they, if they're welcome to turn off their cameras, Uh, and also that when we immortalize the recordings of these, it's in speaker view and it's showing the PowerPoint. And so not to feel like people in the future are going to see them doing visualizations.
Tree and the forest are metaphors for us in terms of individual self-care and team care and building that team care forest. So I can't see on my screen. Is Ty here yet? I don't think so. Okay, she was hitting every red light, so I knew she was going to be late. But so today we're going to develop the tree metaphor and go from that single tree to the forest and talk about what that means for your group back at your work. We'll use a plus delta framework for experimenting with how it feels individually and how it might look when you use that tool as a team. Some of you are familiar with plus delta. And then determining the next steps for team care. And so that's going to be more of a discussion. Sometimes we do a plan, but that will, Ty might need, hello, Ty. Do you need the link?
I'm so sorry, I don't have a link.
Oh, I think Amy emailed it yesterday, but I'll send it to you real quick.
Yeah, I don't have it.
Okay. She didn't have the link. That was the challenge. So hold on. Actually, Amy, if you could just resend it to Ty, it's tpal3@gmail. I'm sure you have her address. So, well, Ty will be here in a second. So I'll go ahead and tell you about, Playworks is somewhere where I worked for 4 years here in DC, and Playworks focuses on recess with kids. And so we were teaching teachers and staff at school how to play recess games with kids, how to play games in the classroom, how to engage kids with icebreakers, how to use attention getters, all of these engagement tools for sort of kid management. And I learned about the brain science of taking breaks, and that really started me on this wellness journey with organizations. But I also learned that kids learn and adults learn too when we get out of our comfort zone. So when we learn something new or we're put in an uncomfortable situation, that's actually when our brains are the most engaged and when we can build new neural connections, which then we rely on later for problem solving and creativity. But I also learned the value of teams, right? Because on every level, those circles we were talking about, my role as an individual within our work team, our junior coaches out at elementary schools who were facilitating recess, and the dynamics of a team are incredibly important. But when you are working with a team or developing a team, sometimes you think more about project management than about people's emotions. And so when I started reading Brene Brown, which we've talked about before, many of you have read her work, she talks about how vulnerability is the flip side of courage, and that being vulnerable with each other is actually what creates empathy, which then builds trust. So the more vulnerable we are as leaders or as exemplars of wellness work, then the more people can empathize with that, able to empathize with her because you've had a similar experience or known that experience in some way. My stepfather's in hospice right now, and I, am emotional about it, but many of you can relate because you've lost family members and you can empathize, right, with that. And now that you know that about me, maybe there's a little bit more trust, right, that I shared, that I was vulnerable enough to share that with you. That's just a real thing that's going on right now in my life. But in your workplace, there are lots of examples of vulnerability. So I just learned a lot more about building teams from literally doing teamwork and recess stuff with kids. And that also led me down the path to meet Ty, who's here in her new nonprofit wellness t-shirt. It looks fantastic, Ty. And we were just doing our tree meditation, and I went over the objectives. And so now you get to, we'll go backwards, and you get to talk about your Team Care Forest story with DCPS if you'd like to share.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your patience as I tried to log on. I am Taisha, or Ty Powell. Former educator, as you see there. I've been a teacher in school leadership for over 15 years now. I always say that I wear many hats, and you can see that here. But throughout my journey, I've been an instructional coach. I've been a student. I'm still in school right now. I am the COO of a yoga studio. And as a former college athlete, I took on this like Kobe Bryant mentality in these different roles, meaning that when any of my teams needed to win or get a job done, I would be the one willing to pick the team up and literally like carry them on my back. That's how you get things done. That's what, I was taught, and that's how you win. Well, with that, I gained some wins, but I lost a lot of me. So while I think on my own experience and the tree and the burnout and the forest and different things like that, I wasn't getting any sleep. I was doing a lot more work than I needed to do, and I wasn't well. So through the help of Susan and others on my journey, I learned that there were other ways. And it required me to be vulnerable and say, hey, I needed help. I'm not okay. And I quickly learned that I don't have to carry the team, but instead I could take on a different Kobe mentality of separating ego from my work to create something bigger. And that will make this work effortless. So through vulnerability, I started, like talking to my team more, asking for help, working towards my strengths and the team strengths, and ultimately learning how to trust people around me. All that to say, I am super passionate about this work that we are doing, and I love the Team Care Forest training.
It's great. And so I already told my story. Actually, Ty, if you could take this part as well.
Absolutely. So we best contribute to teams and productivity when we are all at our peak physical and mental functioning. But we tend, like I said, not to talk about it with each other because of privacy, shyness, boundaries, etc. However, when we do talk about it, we get closer to each other. And this is why we came up with this diagram. The physical wellness, the team health, and the mental health all bring together well-being at work. So this is one of our favorite or our core diagrams that we use to demonstrate how these things work together.
Great. And so as we talked about, courage and vulnerability are two sides of the same coin. They lead to empathy, and then that leads to trust. So another example might be that a leader at work might be vulnerable enough to share that they are having struggles with irritable bowel syndrome, for example, or Crohn's disease or celiac disease or whatever, and they need to radically change their diet. And so they've decided to promote healthier offerings in the kitchen, like swapping out candy bowls for nut bowls, or making other changes as far as offering different teas instead of only coffee. And the leader might get private messages from others on the team saying, here's a recipe that I've tried that fits your dietary guidelines, or, keep it up. I support you. I've had irritable bowel issues for years. We can talk about it, whatever it is, right? And so trust is built when others come forward with their health struggles, if they feel safe to share them, and they can be heard and supported, because even if we've never struggled with that, we empathize. And so that trust is missing in a lot of workplaces, or it's weakened, right? By not being in contact with each other or being in too much contact with each other. I mean, there's lots of reasons why trust sort of deteriorates or might not have ever been there to begin with. But some of you have read Patrick Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, and his assessment is that trust is the foundation on which every other thing is built. And so really, from our perspective, organizational developmentally, we need to figure out ways as leaders to build trust in the workplace. And Taisha's and my contention is that wellness is a good way to do it. So we'll hope to make that case to you today. So here's a video that I love watching. I've watched it so many times. I get something new out of it every time. I can't remember if we saw it before, if I sneak previewed it to you, but even so, we'll watch it again because it really speaks to our theme today of interconnecting the roots of the trees to create a team care forest. So enjoy this 90 seconds or so.
Trees may look like solitary individuals, but the ground beneath our feet tells a different story. Trees are secretly talking, trading, and waging war on one another. They do this using a network of fungi that grow around and inside their roots. The fungi provide the trees with nutrients, and in return they receive sugars. But scientists have found this connection runs far deeper than first thought. By plugging into the fungal network, trees can share resources with each other. The system has been nicknamed the Wood Wide Web. It's thought that older trees, fondly known as mother trees, use this fungal network to supply shaded seedlings with sugars, giving them a better chance of survival. Those trees that are sick or dying may dump their resources into the network, which might then be used by healthier neighbours. Plants also use fungi to send messages to one another. If they're attacked, they can release chemical signals through their roots, which can warn their neighbours to raise their defences. But like our internet, the Wood Wide Web has its dark side too. Some orchids hack the system to steal resources from nearby trees. And other species, like the black walnut, spread toxic chemicals through the network to sabotage their rivals. Arboreal cybercrime aside, scientists are still debating why plants seem to behave in such an altruistic way. The hidden network creates a thriving community between individuals. When you're next in woodland, you might like to think of trees as part of a big superorganism, chatting and swapping information and food under your feet.
So some of you, did we watch that before? I can't remember, but some of you are tree fans. Any reactions to that video?
Learn about our planet and beyond. And the more we learn about everything, the more we realize how interconnected things are and how they support us and each other. And it's just funny that we're still surprised. Like I went, oh, that's so cool. Why am I surprised? Is kind of what my reaction was.
Has anyone read The Overstory by Richard Powers? Put your hand up. No. If you like trees, and Patrice, you will love this book, and Penny, you too. It's a novel, but it's written by a guy who researched trees for 5 years, and he drops the names of like 300 trees in the book. And it's, well, I won't tell you anymore, but it's a compelling nonfiction book about trees, and it makes the trees characters in the story just as much as the humans. So check that out if you like trees. And if you'd rather a nonfiction, there's a book called The Hidden Life of Trees by a German forester that has a lot of incredible facts like you just saw in this BBC video. So check that out.
What was the first book?
It's called The Overstory by Richard Powers. I listened to it on tape and then I had to get the actual book so that I could see the words because it was so compelling to me. And so, yeah, thanks. I'm always, surprised to learn new botanical facts too, and then realize like nature is way more complicated than any of us realize. And just like the black walnut tree, those altruistic trees that dump their resources into the network are also on our teams, you know, who don't want credit or don't take credit for it. So, you know, our previous sessions with the pictures of the tree, you know, when we talk about our roots, that's our self-care, but also our team care when our roots interconnect. Like Taisha and I have built our team, you know, of two, where our roots are interconnected. Like I make her, you know, granola and she gives me chances at Baby Love with Princeton. And that's, you know, symbiotic. We have, you know, we all have different ways of supporting each other in our work, in our lives. And so today we're going to talk about how do we sort of like force those roots to interconnect on your team, right? How do we create systems where you're taking care of each other? Last session, we talked more about the branches, and I have an exciting update that we have a new stressor and resilience scorecard. It used to just be called the stressor scorecard, and we'll send out the new version to you, although it is on our website for download if you'd like to download it for free. But this new stressor scorecard, different from the one that I think you tried, has not only the stressor scores, but also growth and joy scores on the other side. And it goes from sort of not applicable and low and high for either identities or circumstances in your life. So we decided to incorporate that resilience part, the growth and joy, because winds will blow, right? When we were talking about the storm last night, winds are going to blow in your life, but that makes you stronger. And when we look at our stressors as things that actually give us growth and joy, as well as cortisol and stress and all of the negative parts, then we can look at our stressors with a more positive light. Like I was divorced. That brought a lot of pain to me at a certain point in my life, but it also brought me a lot of growth at that time and joy now, later, right? Once the pain has passed. So we can look at the stressors of identity and circumstance as just negative, or we can choose to also see the joy. And that's where we incorporated that into our new tool. So I really would love your feedback on that. Even though I started with a different one and then we changed it on you. So there's another tool that you can try. So, Ty, I mean, I know we have limited time with you, Ty, and so I want to just open it up for you to comment on either of our previous sessions and bringing it to kind of this team care element.
Thank you, Susan. So, I'm glad I always get this slide because this is one of my favorite things, the personal stress prescription. I'm always telling Susan, we have to recognize the I within the we as well, too. So before you walk in that door, like Susan said, you have things that you need to work on as well as things that you need to assess and look at and, analyze before you come into the workplace. The personal stress prescription is always one that I suggest for everyone. What are the areas in your life that you need to increase and decrease? Because that's going to add to your team care as well, too. So I would love to see in the chat if anybody can share a few words of something you've been working on with your personal stress prescription. And this is just a little subtle way of publicly writing and showing that vulnerability in just a few words of accountability to the team and also inspiration for others. So be courageous here. Would love to see that in the chat.
And you'll notice we like to be transparent in our train the trainer sessions like this, that we're repeating things. We're bringing the prescription back to you. We're talking about the stressor scorecard again, because you'll see new things at a different month, at a different time, after you've thought about it a certain way. So we're asking you the same question of, what have you worked on? Because this is, like Amy said, a process where you're going to work on new things, you're going to learn new things. So I don't see anything in the chat box yet. Oh, there we go. Listening to podcasts on mindfulness. Is mindfulness an app? I'm continuing listening. I've been having trouble sleeping and I found this to be helpful. Maybe some of you will too. No pressure, no, nothing unprofessional, but you're being a little bit vulnerable by saying I've been having trouble sleeping. And then other people can take or leave that resource. So Beth says, I'm trying to take notice. Oh, great. Take time to notice nature. Well, Beth, what a big fan of ecotherapy I am. Meditation minis. Lovely. And that's on YouTube, Marian? Time with your dog. No, time with your dog is definitely not frivolous. Dogs are little therapists with fur. Same with cats. And time spent getting ready. Yeah, people really have incorporated like getting ready or like washing their face at night. Like this can be a self-care ritual. This can be a mindfulness time. Increasing exercise for stress reduction. Yeah, planning camping trips. Yay. I just went on a 24-hour camping trip to see some of the spring ephemeral flowers in upper Maryland or western Maryland, and it was great. A
See,
life.
I've really been practicing gratitude more, and you'll be pleasantly surprised how much that feeds back into you. The more gratitude that you're giving, and just saying thank you, and stopping and talking to people beyond, I'm good, it's okay.
I've been thinking the same thing. I've been signing my emails like this. I put it in the chat, gratefully, Susan. And at first it felt awkward, but then I was like, well, it'll remind people that we're focused on gratitude. And then every time I type it, I'm like, yeah, I am grateful. And even if I was typing about something that was a little stressful, like signing off, like gives me a boost of gratitude. And Ty, anything you want to say about the stressor scorecard before you have to go?
Yes, thank you. Again, another tool about the stressor scorecard. You have not given them the new one quite yet.
That's right. I know you have to go, but you speak so eloquently to joy and growth on this stuff. I didn't know if you wanted to add something to what I said.
No, like I said, recognizing the I within the we is very important to me. So your personal stress, and then what stressors are you bringing into the door? And that's a perfect opportunity to open up to others. Susan and I have had, very deep conversations about what's going on in America, being Black in America recently. And it's been helpful. It's been really helpful to diffuse the stress for me and how I'm presenting in the workplace. Because if I walk in feeling all tense about this and no one to talk to about it, or feel like I don't have anyone to talk to about it, it spirals into other things. So the stressor scorecard is more important than you realize. And I love how we add the resilience piece, because there's joy in that as well as some stress. So I appreciate you all letting me hop on for a little while. I do have a bunch of middle schoolers waiting for me, as you can hear. Um, I'm gonna hop on, Susan.
Okay, great. Have a great day, Ty.
Bye,
And
everyone.
then I'll share my screen again. Oh, wait, no, I don't want to leave. I want to share screen because I want you to see the new stressor scorecard, which I didn't put on the slide yet. So this is what the new stressor scorecard looks like. We have the challenge scale and the growth and joy scale. And we added a few things to circumstance, and we also reworded the previous stressor scorecard, had it framed as the sort of stressed group or the oppressed group, where we would say person of color or female instead of gender or race. And this version opens up the conversation. So it doesn't put the emphasis on the oppressed group as much as the identity group. And in circumstances, some of them are the same and some of them we broadened out a little bit. Like we added impacted by incarceration and impacted by military service, because those are two things that cause stressors as circumstances in people's lives. You know what? I know there was like sudden life event. Now I'm wondering if this is the final version. Well, anyway, it looks a lot like this. And that might be something that you want to test with your teams. But I would like to open up the conversation to see if anyone actually tried the stressor scorecard, the older version, with your team, and whether you had any discussion about it. I think it was part of our sort of homework from the last session. Whether you discussed anything personally with someone off the stressor scorecard, or if you introduced it to anyone else in your workplace. No points off if you didn't, but I'm just curious if anyone had an experience using that tool that you'd like to share.
I can share because I shared it with my staff yesterday. So
anymore, I guess it's more of an assessment or discussion tool. All of our things are just discussion tools, right? Thank you so much for sharing your experiences with that tool. This is the older one where we had them framed in that way. So we talked about how you use the personal stress prescription whether you discussed anything scored on the stressor scorecard. And so now, you know, Marion, you said in your team, you discussed how you relieve that stress, or, you know, what stress, it sounds like maybe more individual sharing about like what different folks do. So how do we, I want to open up the conversation about what we can do as a team, as a work team, to support each other's stress, like whether it's an individual thing, like, hey, Beth, I know you're trying to get ready for that half marathon. Did you go running this weekend? How was it? Or just like supporting someone in their goal, or like setting up a system like the nut bowl instead of the candy bowl that would support the whole team. So I'm curious if any of you have ideas that you've either thought of but not tried, or you've tried, or you've seen another, you know, workplace try. So let's open up that discussion of team care. What are some tips and ideas that you've seen, or that you have, where you can support folks individually or as a group? And the personal stress prescription gives clues, right, but not sort of systems. So you bring your lunch, or you know, you can do it virtually. One thing that can help and build sort of that team care and the user design element, because those who build it sustain it, is maybe asking folks to share something at those meetings, like a talent or a story. So for example, you know, Taylor might have gotten really into bike riding. I don't know your personal life, Taylor, but whatever, you know, it could be knitting, it could be cooking, right? Making mustard, whatever your thing is. And if you know that about somebody on your team, and you know that they might be willing, you might go to that first person and say, hey, I heard you talking about your mustard making. Would you mind talking about that at our upcoming wellness session? Because I know it brings you a lot of joy. And I think people would be interested, and we could talk about dietary changes as well, or whatever it is, right? Or it could be, you know, I know you're into yoga. Maybe you could lead us in some brief stretches and tell us how you got into yoga. And then you would maybe feature a different person every session, so that, and people could volunteer. It wouldn't be, you know, forced. But that way folks are sharing their gifts with each other, and they're making themselves vulnerable because they're talking about something in their lives, but that they're passionate about. And you build skills. People go, oh, I didn't know you could make mustard, or, oh, I didn't know you could do yoga in a chair, or you can get a bike for under $200, or whatever, you know, like, but they're asking each other the questions. And then they know if they have bike questions, they can go to Taylor. If they have yoga questions, they can go to Patrice. And it just builds those bonds, you know, and I call it DIY PD, like do it yourself professional development. So Beth says her team wants to plant something together. Amazing. And so if anybody has a resource for that in the Charleston area, I recently brought a guy, he's amazing. He's a native plant, the head of the Native Plant Society in Maryland. And I just had a Zoom call with him and invited neighbors and native plant people. And he gave a presentation on spring ephemerals and talked about native plants and answered our questions. And he had all these beautiful pictures. And it was just so great to just learn something and see the pictures, and then get inspired to go look at plants and flowers and go buy some more natives for my property. And so Beth, I love that. And you know, gardening has been linked to a lot of like ecotherapy, antidepressants. There are apparently antidepressant microbes in the soil that we absorb through our skin. So literally, like when we get out in the dirt, or kids play in the mud, or we're gardening, we're actually, you know, not only breathing fresh air, getting exercise, connecting to nature, but we're actually, you know, being exposed to microbes that help our brain health. So Google it if you don't believe me. But that kind of thing, or tree planting, you know, this season can be incredible. We have cicadas here. Do y'all have the cicadas, the Brood-X in your region? We have the 17-year cycle of cicadas coming out, so we have to be careful of planting young trees and bushes this season. Anyway, thanks for those examples. The DIY professional development or group thing can be virtual. Like you can have a lunch and learn online, and you know, a featured speaker. Or it could be like half an hour, we're going to focus on knitting with, Penny. And then the second half, we're going to talk about our personal stress prescriptions or good recipes or whatever, right? So, I think getting people involved in the facilitation of it so that you're not always like the leader saying like, today we're going to talk about nutrition is really important, because then people practice their presentation skills, they connect with their coworkers, and maybe you'll find a leader that you can pass this off to, and you can be like, you're in charge of the wellness committee now because you're really into this and you made the whole schedule for June. Would you like to be in charge of the wellness committee next year? It's leadership development. Some of y'all got some good ideas from that. And I wanted to mention too, I put in the chat box, DIY Jeopardy. Like one thing you can, that I did with the team is if you did like a questionnaire of like, where did you grow up? And what's your favorite tree? And, what's your favorite food? Or any questions that are maybe related to, your work or your geography or your families, whatever. And you have one coordinator, you collect all those things from people, and then they plug it into a Jeopardy game. And then, you have to, it's a little more effort because you have to come up with the question that matches the answer, but it's a really fun engagement tool. Again, if you're having virtual meetings, it can be done virtually, and people say, I'll take types of trees we like for 200, Amy. And then Amy reads the question, or whoever's in charge of the game, right? And that can make it really fun for like a retreat, or a staff meeting, but it takes a little preparation. But they have all these things online. You can fill it in. You can make your own crossword puzzles, your own word search activities. So if you need kind of like a special activity for a meeting, those are ideas that the internet has made very easy for us. Thank you for all of those incredible ideas. So it's 10 and we're just gonna do a little stretch while I encourage you to, I'm gonna share my screen again so you won't be on camera, and you can turn your camera off if you want. Now that I'm warmed up a little bit, I'll show you my Mom Boss shirt. I spoke at the St. Jude's Mom Boss Summit last night, and they gave us shirts. They gave my daughter a shirt that says, "My mom is a boss," which I thought was really cute. So I want to talk about appreciative inquiry while we just do a little stretch, and you can stretch in any way you want. And also I love like changing the culture around meetings where like it's okay to get up and stretch in the middle of a meeting. It doesn't mean you're unprofessional. It means you're actually, really dedicated to paying attention. So basically, the plus delta model is based in appreciative inquiry, like recognizing strengths, recognizing what's going well, and maybe your core competencies. These things are easiest to continue. So it's kind of like being grateful for what you already have, but being grateful for what is going well. And so this can be related to wellness, like when we say, oh, what have you done today to take care of yourself? Or what are you trying off the personal stress prescription? Or what are some of your habits for wellness? That would be the appreciative inquiry. What you're already doing, you're probably going to keep doing. There's a low barrier to keep doing that. But when we think about the delta, what we should change, that can be a dreaming thing or designing something more. Or it could be a deleting thing where we're going to change something by getting rid of it. So for me, 3 years ago, I noticed that drinking was starting to take a more primary role. Like I always wanted to drink when I made dinner, and every night I would look forward to having that drink. And for me, it was just easier to just cut it out than to kind of modulate my exposure. So for me, that was a delete change. For some people, they might need to drink a little bit more, or maybe go out to happy hours with their coworkers when we could do that again, or maybe have a glass of wine with a friend and a happy hour of Zoom. So I'm not trying to be judgmental about alcohol. It's just that you can change something by increasing it or by decreasing it, by introducing it or by deleting it. But you want to have a vision, right, for what that change is for. So first, we're going to just think about the plus delta for you as an individual. And you can do this on your own, but basically you want to look at what's going well right now for you in your physical health practices. So remember, physical is just anything with the body, what you eat or drink, how you rest or sleep, and how you move, exercise, or stretch. So for you, just on your own, on a scratch sheet of paper, just jot down a plus for your physical health. Something that's already going well. Might be that you drink 8 glasses of water a day. It might be that you get out and take a walk around the block every morning with your dog, or that you're really good at getting 7 hours of sleep every night, or taking naps, whatever's going well for you. And now something that's going well for you in your mental health practices. Now that could actually be physical, because what we do with our bodies absolutely impacts our mental health. But it also could be about relationships. It could be about, following my red circle here, it could be about spirituality or gratitude. It could be about, managing oppression, addiction, mental illness, any therapeutic or pharmaceutical tools that you engage around mental health. Could even be art, music, right? Nature, things that contribute to your mental health. Paula's here. I've met her. So something that's going well for you in your mental health practice. And this is a little bit more challenging, but it's on an individual level, what's going well for you on team health? And that might be a one-on-one thing, like Jim was mentioning, or I think it was Patrice that mentioned that. Or it might be something related to something you're doing individually to contribute to the team's health. Like, I fill up the nut bowl every week. It's for the team. And now something that you would like to change. It might be something you'd like to add or something you'd like to delete. So again, for your physical health, mental health, and team health, and I'll give you a minute to work on this silently. Hi, Paula. Thanks for joining. And so the point of this is not just to be sort of grateful and appreciative of what we're already doing and what's going well, but to think about a goal or a commitment or an intention that you have that you can put some words to. So for example, maybe on the change, the delta for you, you might want to get more exercise. But that's not a great goal, frankly. It's not measurable and it's not small. The best goals are small and quantifiable so that you can easily meet them and you know when you did it. Get more exercise, not a goal. Do 1 push-up per day, that's a good mini goal. Or, if push-ups aren't in your practice, maybe it's 1 squat, per day, or whatever the thing is. But it's something that you can easily do, and maybe you'll do more, but it's quantifiable and you'll know when you got it done, which means you get a dopamine hit in your brain to reward you for that behavior. So there are lots of, books on habit change and goal setting, and most of the experts say that, small goals are best. So the third part of this exercise is to set those goals, to look at that delta list and think, like, what's one thing that I could measure that I could set a goal around for this. And so we'll talk about team health in a second, but is anyone willing to share like a small goal that they're considering? You don't have to commit to it yet, for their physical health or their mental health, or you could workshop it with us if you'd like. I might tell you it's too big of a goal, but that's my common response. Anyone want to share one of either their delta or an actual goal that you think would be appropriate to take on?
Meditating for 20 minutes.
That's big, Patrice. But maybe you meant once a week. I don't know. Maybe you meant just one time ever.
No, I was thinking daily. So meditate for 10 minutes.
I'd say 3, 2. I mean, maybe you're a practiced meditator, but that's a big 20 minutes is huge for meditation. Huge.
I used to be a practice meditator, but I've really gotten back. So yeah, I could start with smaller.
Point being, it doesn't forbid you from doing 20 minutes a day. Like saying my goal is 2 minutes a day means you could meditate for an hour a day. You're still meeting your goal.
Okay.
But if you only get to 2, you're not disappointed with yourself.
That
Right?
makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
Thank you for sharing and being brave and letting me give you feedback on that. Anyone else want to share or workshop your idea for either a delta or a mini goal? But you realize that like smiling would make people feel better, or maybe you're going to send around a funny video to the team to hope, say, I hope this made me laugh. I hope it makes you laugh too, because laughter is important for our mental health. And so even if they don't think it's funny, they know why you're doing it. So these are individual actions that we can take that contribute to the team's health. And then the next kind of the next step on this, so thank you for sharing, is to think about it as the team. And like and you can do this by yourself about the team, or you can do this with your team about the team. But the individual versus team, the tree versus forest, is a different look. And so that's what I want you to do now. I'll give you another minute to think about that team level physical health. What do we do as a team to support each other's physical health? It might be that you have a nut bowl. I keep bringing up the nut bowl. Let me bring up a different one. That you've encouraged walking meetings in your office. And so you encourage people to take their meetings on the phone while they walk. And that's an accepted practice. It might be, for mental health, that you're asking check-in questions at the beginning of your staff meeting, and you dedicate 10 minutes to that so that people can connect on some topic before they dive into the work part. And then team health, are you doing a retreat or, fun eating activities or games, with Pictionary stuff and Jeopardy, whatever it might be that is going well already, at the team level, for the team by the team kind of thing, or, and then again with the changes. So any questions about this exercise? You're contributing to team health if you ask a question that other people probably have too. Let me give you a minute to just think about this, the plus delta at the team level. And then I will ask you to think about some goals that might be achievable. Again, small, because these are little steps, change culture, not big steps usually. We don't just have a job. We have a job that's trying to deal with the world or change the world. And that's a very stressful thing, especially in an increasingly stressful world. And we take it kind of for granted. Like we forget that we have this really uphill climb, and we're like Sisyphus pushing the big rock up the hill, and it keeps, coming down a little, and we keep pushing. You have to be really strong. But in this work, when we ask people to be more vulnerable at work, then sometimes that can be like a tipping point for people. Or for example, if we always ask the people of color in the organization to like take on diversity and equity and inclusion initiatives, or we, are turning to African Americans to help us understand the tragedy of George Floyd or any of the other police shootings or racial challenges that we have in this country, we're asking that person to take on more stress, so that we can learn. And so there is like a challenge to this vulnerability piece. And I'm glad you brought up, Patrice, the positive reinforcement piece, because I recently did a training on giving feedback, and my co-trainer and I were talking about the brain science of feedback, and how when we are given positive feedback, our brain treats it like a reward, like a dopamine hit kind of reward. Whereas if we're given challenging feedback in a way that either we don't trust or that challenges something innate about us, in our lizard brains, we go into a sort of fight or flight mode. And in that mode, as we talked about the neuroscience of stress, like we can't learn, we can't plan, we can't actually take in that feedback when we're triggered. And so positive reinforcement, if it's authentic, right? And if it's specific, not like, oh, Amy, you're so great. Like, Amy, you did an amazing job with that spreadsheet. I don't even know those formulas you used. You're going to have to teach me sometime. Like, that's a very specific thing that Amy can feel good about.
Right.
Not just like, Amy, you're so great. But if it's authentic and if it's specific, then positive feedback can be like a monetary bonus. It can be like your favorite cake on a plate. Like, your brain is rewarded by that positive feedback. And Dean Smith, who's a famous basketball coach, who's dearly departed, but I worked for him when I was at University of North Carolina. I was a statistician for the men's basketball team. And he wrote many books, but in some of them, he says that he would have to give players about 4 or 5 times sort of the positive reinforcement as the critical corrections, because it took that ratio in order for them to really get and understand and apply the critical correction. And so positive reinforcement all by itself is incredibly important for a team, and that focusing on the positive, and maybe it's paired with, okay, and here's something we could do better. Here's the plus, here's the delta, but also just positive. Sending somebody an email with just gratitude or just a compliment or just an appreciation goes incredibly far as a leader and as a team builder. So Patrice, I'm really glad that you brought that up. And if you're interested in sort of the psychology of positive, reinforcement, I encourage you to dive into that as well.
So thanks for the information behind it, but that's what I've been doing, is individual things and then also team stuff, but just very focused on what threats we've been through and the strengths that have stood up. And like you said, we take it all for granted, and I'm trying not to at this point. So thank you for kind of educating me on the behind the scenes stuff. But
I mean, we'd like to bring brain science into all of this because it helps people just understand the why it's so important that we focus time and energy on it. Wellness is kind of like also, like, oh, that's nice. But for our work, it's actually mission critical because people burn out in our jobs. There's, if I can rant for a second, there was a study done before the pandemic that 45% of nonprofit workers plan to change their job in the next few years. That was before the pandemic. And now that there's been this society reckoning of what are our values? What are we doing? Who are we with? How do we spend our days? There's a lot more people. There's going to be, the Society for Human Resource Management called it a turnover tsunami. And there was an article in the New York Times yesterday about the corporate world and all of the crazy, all of the crazy corporate benefits that they're offering to keep workers, because people are like, F it, I don't want to work for this bank anymore, I'm leaving. Or I want to work in Key West, if you don't let me, I'm going to quit. And so Credit Suisse is offering $20,000 lifestyle adjustment bonuses to its junior bankers. And LinkedIn is giving another free week of vacation to its employees. And at Twitter, you get a day of rest off every month for free. Like, so companies are offering all sorts of wellness benefits. And frankly, they always have. Deloitte, PwC used to get $1,000 a year. Just spend it on whatever you want for wellness. Or actually, Deloitte had a matching thing. If you spend 500, they'll give you 500. So people are like, I'm going to buy a Peloton bike. I'm going to get a gym membership, and you can pick whatever you want. Well, that's great if you can throw money at the problem. But nonprofits, social service agencies, schools, we don't have that kind of money to throw around. So we have to DIY. We have to create it ourselves and do it on the cheap. So that's what we specialize in. Marian, you look like you're
Yeah,
eager.
I think it's even hard for nonprofits to give extra time off, even though you might want to, but when you're small staff and you don't have a lot of other people to kind of backfill or fill in, because I'm sitting here thinking, well, yeah, that I love that idea of like a extra day off or something like that, but that can be challenging in some nonprofit environments as well. Not from a money standpoint, but just a HR, people on the
Totally.
people to answer the phones or to help, the clients or whatever. Yeah.
But, I bet your team, Marian, I'm just guessing, but I bet if you said, hey, Twitter's doing this thing, I read about it in the New York Times, I'd love to do it. Like, how could we make that work? Like, I bet your team would come up with some really interesting solution. They could be like, well, we could route the calls through Google Voice and I could answer them at home while Amy takes half the day off and then we switch. Like they'll come up with some solutions that you might not have even thought of if they know that your intention is there. But that's great. And, you might not be able to give a day off. Maybe you could give everybody a massage cane. I've been having some back issues. And so I like dig this into my pressure points, or like, a seat cushion or something that shows that you care, right? But it's not super expensive thing. But I'd love to have a plant in my office if somebody could tell me better ways to take care of it, or like the good low maintenance plant. Like maybe you have a little lunch and learn about office plants and then you improve the air quality of your office and you are watering a plant and taking care of it, which is good for your health, right? So there are lots of, you could have a little lunch and learn on colors, and blue is calming and red is good for digestion, and then decide which paint colors you want to put in your, there's lots of things you can do with that effort. What plants do you want to see outside in the garden? Anybody willing to build a labyrinth, outside so we can take mindful walks? Like, there's so many things with the returning to the office that we can reset and use as an opportunity for discussions around physical and mental health. So those are incredible examples. Thanks, Amy. I have a few other things to share with you that might be good resources for your teams, but these ideas I feel like are super valuable. And so I don't want to cut off conversation about them if there are more to share. So does anyone else have something to share, ideas about what your physical, mental, or team health kind of examples or practices could be with the teams? Anything around movement, for example? Like laughing really, really like loud and heartily, like really laughing
Right.
can lower that cortisol and complete that stress cycle. But movement is the most effective way. Amy, the only thing I'd offer there is that those who build it sustain it, right? So many leaders, myself included, have had great intentions and been like, I am announcing the Peloton, or whatever it is, the treadmill.
Yeah.
And people are like, okay, I didn't want a treadmill, but that's nice that you did, Susan, or whatever. And then they didn't help build it. They didn't have any say in it. And so they're not going to necessarily use it. And so for the gym, you might like take a poll, like what exercise equipment would you like to see? And then they're helping build it, and then they'll use it.
Yeah.
Or incentives, like, a little sign every time you go down and initial the sheet. Once you get 10 gold stars, you get a Starbucks card, whatever it is, whatever the incentives are for actually doing it, so that people are convinced to try.
Yeah.
It's a great example. And if you're interested in the stress cycle concept, I think I talked before about Burnout, this book by Emily and Amelia Nagoski. And it's the secrets to unlocking the stress cycle. Have you read this?
No, I haven't.
If you're more of a podcast person, they have an interview. They're twins, they're identical twins. And they have a podcast with Brene Brown on, I think it's Brene Brown's podcast series. And it's a really good interview. It was post-COVID, and one of the twins has like long-term COVID and was having brain fog and talking about that. But it's a really great conversation if you don't have time to read a book, although it is very readable and accessible. Big print, love that. But that gives a lot more kind of accessible brain science. They don't use a lot of big words, so I always like that.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not just exercise to look good in my clothes. It's exercise to regulate my hormones and prevent diabetes in my life.
Yeah.
Oh, the burnout book, the author is Emily and Amelia Nagoski, Nagoski. One of them is a conductor. She teaches music. And the other one is a sex educator at a college. So now let me share just a couple more resources that you might want to utilize with your team, or you might want to dive in further. So I don't think we've gone over this yet. This is one of many, many habit change tools that we kind of adapted. And it's this, and you can download this off our site too, if you'd like, but it sometimes is a discussion tool for teams. Like, hey, if you are setting a new goal for wellness, like, where are you on that habit change cycle? Because like, we're all here right now talking about it. So we're at least at the contemplation stage, maybe even the preparation stage, or maybe you've started something, like you all said in the chat box at the beginning of this, you started to change a habit. Maybe you've maintained that behavior, but probably you've relapsed or taken a pause, and that's fine because that's expected in a habit change. And maybe you jump back on the same horse, or maybe you decide to change your goal and try a different goal or a different habit. But also, who can support you? That's the team care part. It's nice if you make a goal by yourself, but if you can't achieve it by yourself, we'll talk about that in the next slide, then you need some support. You might need a coach. You might need to pay somebody so that you're losing money if you don't do it, or pay for your gym membership, whatever. You might need some reminders in your calendar or from somebody else, you know? So there are different ways that you can discuss these changes, the plus delta changes and habits and goals that we make for ourselves. And this is just kind of a hodgepodge of like interesting team things that I wanted to share with you. If you're interested in the Project Aristotle was named because I think it was Aristotle that said the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And that's what we think about teams, but Google set out to explore why. So they, across their workforce, did a multi-year study of the most effective teams and what they had in common. And the number one thing that set their successful teams apart at Google was psychological safety. So again, that issue of trust. Can we take risks on this team without feeling insecure or embarrassed? And I would argue that's probably what we want for our teams. Taking risks to say something unpopular, taking risks to share something vulnerable, taking risks to suggest a change that someone might say no to. And then, of course, dependability, structure, meaning, impact. We knock it out of the park on meaning of the work, right? In the nonprofit and education sector, we got meaning of work down, usually. Sometimes we have to revisit, remind ourselves, but like, we're good on that. Taylor, I thought you were giving me a thumbs up. So this is, I think I've mentioned the Gretchen Rubin rubric before. I have her book in English and Spanish. It's called The Four Tendencies. And it's about how you react to internal expectations and external expectations. Whew, glad that glass was empty and didn't break. I just use jars as glasses because then they don't break as easily. So has anyone done, show of hands, anyone done the Four Tendencies? No? Okay, so this might be new for you. It's pretty simple. It's only the internal and external expectations. It's not like your entire personality, like MBTI or astrology or the Enneagram. And there are basically two ways you can react. You can either uphold internal expectations or reject them, or you can uphold external expectations or reject them. And so if you do well with both, you're an upholder. I'm an obliger, which means I do great with external expectations. So I got good grades in school because I know what I had to do to get them, but I'm terrible at my own goals. So I want to practice yoga every morning, but do I? No, because I don't have any accountability for that. Ty is a questioner. So she and I are opposites and we bring a lot of balance to each other. Ty will question everything. She's always asking questions, and not just because she's a coach. She will ask a question of why we're doing it. Why is it due that day? Is this really what the way we want to do it? Because she needs to be convinced herself that an external goal is valid before she will commit to it. So questioners are noted for. But if a questioner sets a goal, they're convinced that that's a good goal and they're going to achieve it. So they're the opposite of me. And then a rebel has challenges with upholding both internal and external expectations. But interestingly, and it's a smaller group, upholders and rebels are the smallest groups. But rebels, interestingly, like do well in like the military, which you wouldn't think. You're like, they're a rebel. How would they do well being told what to do? Because if a rebel agrees to the ultimate goals of the structure, the entity, whether it's a workplace, the military, a school, they'll follow the rules because they're like, okay, I get why we're doing that. So I will line up, I will polish my shoes, I will, follow the rules. So it's not that a rebel is, off on their own doing who knows what. It's that they have to, be managed in a certain way. And they really have to kind of believe in the ultimate why. So the book gives a ton of, more information. You can just take the quiz. Amy, there's somebody in the waiting room. I'm not sure if that's, I'll let you deal with that. But you can take the quiz online. It's free. It takes about 5 minutes. And if you just Google 4 Tendencies quiz, you'll find it. And you'll get a little information right then about your type, and you can dig in or not. She has programs, she has books, she has podcasts. She's also the one that wrote The Happiness Project, which kind of annoyed me. And then I realized once I read the 4 Tendencies, it's because she's an upholder and I'm an obliger, and I get mad at people that can like achieve all their own, internal goals. And she was like, I'm just going to do a new happiness thing every day for a year. And I was like, that sounds impossible. But anyway, that's another tool that you might use, but also your team might use. And we do these group discussions sometime when people take the quiz, and then we talk about it and what that means for management and teamwork. Because as you can see that, as a manager, if your direct report is a questioner, you might be taking their questions as like insubordination or like doubt about the instruction you've just given them. And it's not. It's them like becoming more and more engaged in this thing and, testing out, kicking the tires. So this is Taisha's slide that she usually speaks to. And I haven't read this, so I'm not going to try and replicate it for you. So I'll let you read what's on the slide. And if you're interested, you can Google this. But Taisha, with her leadership education doctorate, has been doing a lot of reading about all of this as well. Does anyone know Rolf Dobely? I don't even know how to pronounce that. Is that familiar to anyone? Me neither. It's on my list. So many books on the list, right? And because we're running low on time, I'll go to the next. So this is the Patrick Lencioni 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. If you were wondering what all the things are on top of trust that challenge teams, it's fear of conflict, lack of commitment, avoidance of accountability, and inattention to results. And then the challenges that cause those things are on the side. So invulnerability, like that's what we're talking about with vulnerability, right? When we make ourselves vulnerable, we actually encourage trust. And if you have artificial harmony, like everyone just kind of fake smiles and then goes off to happy hour and complains about their job, then there's probably fear of conflict. you know, they don't have that psychological safety that Google studied to take risks on this team, or they're told by their leader, verbally or non-verbally, that conflict is not what we do here. So Patrick Lencioni, a lot of folks have read him and his work. His book, Five Dysfunctions of a Team, is kind of a parable. So as he tells it like a story, which is nice, about a new CEO and a leadership team. And so you get to know the characters rather than just reading about the psychology, which I find helpful. And he has a workbook too, which one of my previous employers took, and I've never replaced it. So those are just some more tools that you can look into, that either you might bring up with your team as discussion items, like, hey, what's your 4 tendencies type? Let's talk about what that means for our team. Or, you know, maybe you share it with some of your leaders that you know, like to read or like to listen to podcasts, and you say like, hey, I listened to this and I had some interesting thoughts. I'd love for you to listen to it too, and we can discuss it in one of our future meetings. And that might be a way that you could bring up, you know, team dynamics or difficult conversations with someone that you're working with. So for our last few minutes together, I just wanted to open it up for more discussion about, you know, your homework for this session is really to try any of these things with your team that we've talked about today, or that you've heard from your colleagues in this group, because there were a lot of ideas expressed. I hope that you know, either took some ideas directly or it inspired some of your own. But when we come back together in May, I would love to hear about, you know, some of your return to the office, or your discussions about days off, or, you know, the things that you can set goals for team care, for building those roots that interconnect, for building that forest that is diverse and interdependent, and for building trust on our teams, you know, using the positive feedback and appreciative inquiry and gratitude to really inspire people to recognize the positivity and also trust each other a little bit more. So it's kind of vague homework. Do some stuff with your team, but hopefully you'll run with that. So just opening it up for questions or discussion or ideas, if anyone would like to make a commitment to the group about what they're going to try so that we hold you accountable next time, I encourage that.
Have some wellness practice with our teams from 2 to 3. So if you haven't already, please make sure that you tell your team about it, invite them, give them the link. That's the same link. It's the same code that we used to join this meeting. And we'll be back together at 2 o'clock with Pamela Santer leading us through more of the wellness practices that we requested in the beginning, and that we can share with our team throughout this journey that goes on forever, as I said at the beginning.
Great. Well, feel free to reach out to me. As always, if I zoom through a lot of resources and don't put them in the chat box, if you need any recommendations, please reach out. And, you know, I encourage you to share those links with each other, with Amy to share with us, or, you know, if you have a good mindfulness link or a really funny video that will make folks laugh out loud and complete that stress cycle, you know, send around those links to this team, to your team, or to just a good friend. And hopefully you can build some more team care in your forest. And we'll see you I'll see you next month. You'll see each other this afternoon. Thanks again for another great morning, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. See you at 2 o'clock.
All right.
Have a good break.